All righty, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome to everyone. I'm Stephen Berkowitz. I'm the president of the Public Affairs Research Council of Louisiana, which is a nonpartisan state policy watchdog organization and research organization. We're having these monthly webinars. I think they've been quite successful so far, and I think this is going to be another one. I'd like to thank our sponsor, ExxonMobil, for making this happen. Today, we're going to be talking about overhauling Louisiana's voting systems. We have 10,000 aging voting machines that need to be replaced. To talk about that, we have a fantastic panel. If I could go through, we have Senator Sharon Hewitt as chair of the Senate Governmental Affairs Committee, which oversees this process and is the author of the bill that created the Voting Systems Commission for the purpose of evaluating and recommending the type of voting machine we should get. And by the way, our first returning panelist for our webinars. Thank you for that. I guess not been too bad. We also have Ascension Parish Clerk of Court, Bridget Hanna. Bridget also sits on the Voting System Commission and is president of the Clerk of Courts Association. And she has assured me that she speaks for all the other clerks of court, which is a bold claim, but good for her. And last but not least, we have Secretary of State Kyle Ardoin. He moved his schedule quite around a bit to be here, and I really want to thank him for that. I want to thank all of y'all for participating. I want to thank everyone else who's also participating on this webinar. We have these webinars at 12:15, so people can grab their lunch, heat up their leftovers or their lean cuisine and eat at their desk, and so it works into their schedule. But I know a lot of people can't make it even then, so this is being recorded, and we will put it on our YouTube channel afterward. We're going to start out with a few questions for myself, just to sort of get things started. If you have a question, you can use the Q&A button, or if you put it in the chat, we'll try and grab that too. We tend to group questions that are similar type together. And then Melinda is going to ask the next set of questions, and she'll also curate the questions from the other participants. I'm going to urge everyone, we only have 45 minutes. Please try to stay on topic. We're talking about the selection of the voting machines and not trying to relitigate what happened in the 2020 or other elections. So I really urge everyone to kind of stay on that. With that, if we have any other questions, let's kick it off. All right. So we have to replace these 10,000 aging voting machines. If everything goes well, best case scenario, what are you hoping to get out of it? What can the people of Louisiana expect? Why don't we start? Senator, why don't you start, because you kind of started off with this voting system commission, and maybe you can kind of talk about your goals.
Well, Stephen, I appreciate that, and thank you for having me back on the show. And it's nice to be here with Clerk Hanna and Secretary Ardwan, and because we've been working together quite a bit to replace our aging voting machines. And I did start this out with legislation. As you know, the biggest thing that I think separates our country from other countries is the right to vote. And people around the country and in our state want to know that their vote counts, that everyone that is eligible to vote has an opportunity to vote, and that every vote counts. The Secretary had been in the process over the last few years, wanting to replace our aging machines. After the 2020 elections, he began that process again. And I felt like it was the perfect time for us just to sort of take a breath after those elections and reevaluate what all the other states are doing and how we could best move forward. And the Secretary agreed with that. And so we worked together to pass legislation that basically put us on a path. And that is a paper-based system because it can be audited. And that was the biggest issue for me. It's a paper trail that can be audited. With our current system, which has served us well, but has become very outdated, we only are able to audit absentee by mail ballots because there is no paper trail for early voting or election day voting. And so this bill basically puts our state on a path to use only a paper-based system. And there are multiple ways to do that. So the idea behind the creation of the Voting System Commission was to bring all the people together that are involved in the election process, like the clerks of court, the registrars of voters, all the experts that the Secretary works with, disability representative, some legislators, so that everyone's voice could be heard. And these were being done in a public forum, so the public had an opportunity to participate in this very transparent process. We will make recommendations to the secretary. He will continue to do his job as he has always done in moving our state forward and taking those recommendations forward through an RFP process to replace our old system with a new system. I think it's been very transparent and very educational for the members of the commission, as well as the public, on all the good things we currently do and the new things that we need to build into our system going forward.
Great. Bridget, why don't you go next and tell us from the the local perspective, the people on the ground, what are you hoping to get out of this process? What is the best case scenario?
Okay, so thank you for having me here. I'm happy to be here and share the clerk's thoughts. First of all, I do want to say that I am very proud of our election system. The Secretary of State, the Registrar of Voters, and the clerks work very closely together. And I could not be more proud of the work that we all do. I don't know if y'all know this, but we were voted last year 7th in the nation in integrity for our election system. And I think it's probably going to go even further down than that, hopefully like to 5, and maybe one day we'll get to 1. But I'm very proud of that. And I just want to say that to begin with. On the local side, I work with, of course, the voters a lot, and then I train the commissioners. All of the clerks train the commissioners. So what we're looking for is a system that will be easy to use for the voters and for the commissioners. That's really important. I want to watch out for the voters to make sure that they're getting something that they feel comfortable with in using, security-wise, and also their ability to use it. Also, I'm concerned about the ability of all voters to be able to access a voting system regardless of their abilities. And so all of those things are, put into play when the clerks think about what type of system we want. Security is, of course, very important. Functionality is very important. We want to be accurate with everything. But one of our main goals is to make sure that our voters and our commissioners can have a system that they're comfortable with and that's easy to use.
Great. So who did that ranking that put us number 7 and hopefully eventually number 1?
Kyle, you're going to have to answer that one.
The Heritage Foundation.
Okay, great. And so with that, Kyle, why don't you take over and tell us, what you're hoping to get out of this best case scenario when it's all done. Everyone's going to say, this is great for X.
Well, I think that we're all on the same page. We are working towards, as the senator said, and have been talking about for years, that we need a paper-based system that provides us the audit process to give voters the surety that, one, their votes being cast accurately, and that the vote count is exactly what the voters intended. I'm very excited that not only Heritage Foundation ranked us 7th in the nation last year, but they did again this year. I also am pleased that the Electoral Voting Project, which ranks states every 2 years during after the federal cycle, ranks us as 12th in the nation. Of course, there are some issues that they would like to see enacted that our state is not embracing of, like same-day voter registration or automatic voter registration. But I will tell you this: I've said all along, and my other panelists are saying the same thing, and that is, we want a system that gives voters the confidence that their elections are fair, that they're accurate and transparent. And I think that given some recent polling that I've seen, voters are very confident in our state of the system, but they need to be able to verify their vote. And I think a paper-based system provides them that opportunity to do so right there at the polls. If you will, they'll be the first auditor of the system for their individual vote. And then we can assure them afterwards that through audits, regular audits, that their election is fair, accurate, and transparent. Additionally, I want to commend my staff and the registrars and clerks for the hard work that they do, and our commissioners all across the state. The legislative auditor came out with a report in March that gave us glowing marks. They said that there was no doubt that we have an election system that is prominent with integrity, and that the voters can be assured of our system as it currently stands. They did suggest some other things that we were excited about offering. We're working with legislators like Senator Hewitt and Representative Edmonds and Senator Cloud and others to push legislation that provides us opportunities to improve our system. We've worked strongly with the clerks and registrars to make certain that all the legislation that's going through that's going to make us even stronger system is going to get through the process. I've begun talking with the administration about some of those things just to make sure that they understand where we're coming from, and hopefully we can get all of our legislation signed into law. But the bottom line is we are in the gold standard. I just returned from Washington, where I was asked to testify before the Senate Rules Committee about preparations for elections. And we were able to tout the good things that Louisiana does and the significant barriers that we overcome. People, I think, in Louisiana take for granted that how well we do elections, but just take 2020 and 21 together. We had two tropical storms, Cristobal and Beta. Then we had hurricanes Laura, Delta, and Zeta. Zeta hit 6 days before the election, and we still pulled it off. And then, of course, Hurricane Ida, which was one of the strongest to ever hit Louisiana. And we had significant issues to overcome, not only because of the hurricane, but also because supply chain issues with regards to COVID. So I'm very pleased with where we are. I know we're headed in the right direction. I'm pleased that it's a transparent process. As the senator said, we worked together on the legislation, all of us, to make it as best as we could and to make sure that it's a transparent process. And I think in the time frame that we did that, we were able to update, in my opinion, some of the procurement processes that I think were obsolete, that gets us to the point of being able to bring in new voting system for the people of Louisiana.
Great. And I want to talk about all those processes and get into the details. I'm going to turn over to Melinda. Let me just remind everyone, I think we already have 2 questions in the chat. I would urge you to get them in early. What's happened every time is this goes faster than you think. And there's usually a lot of questions, but it always, pains me if we can't get to them all. So please try to get them in early as possible. With that, let's start diving into the details. Melinda, why don't you take over?
Thank you all for being here today. So I wanted to start with something very basic, which is the Voting System Commission has done a lot of its meetings. And I know next month that there is going to be some sort of like trade show-esque kind of showing everybody the options of technology and the various possibilities for voting systems. So at that point, what happens from there? When does the Voting System Commission make its recommendation? And what's the process after that point? I don't know if we want to start with the Secretary of State and then maybe move on from there.
Sure. So we're going to have the trade show at the Capitol Park Museum on June 28th. And the VSC's recommendation meeting will be on June 29th. This is going to give the ability for the voting system commissioners to view equipment and answer or ask questions and get answers to their questions or any concerns. Additionally, it's going to be opened up to the legislature and to the public. And so it will be I think it's a multi-day approach that we have. And so I'm really excited about this. This really makes everything transparent. You get to see everything that every vendor wants to put forth for the people of Louisiana to see. And then we'll be able to come back, the VSC will meet and be able to, if there are any questions, unanswered questions or concerns, we can call up the vendors to answer those questions. And we will take public input, of course, as well. And then we'll take motions from the commission and see what the recommendations are.
And Senator Hewitt, would you like to talk about what you're looking for out of that demonstration process and what you're expecting to see in terms of the different technology options?
Well, I'm a hands-on kind of person, and so I am looking forward to getting to kind of play with the machines and have intentionally really not got too involved in that part of it at this point, because I do believe there are many options that are available, and you have to give companies the opportunity to solve the same problem in a variety of different ways. What I'm looking for is a system, of course, that is secure and allows you to audit. And so I do believe there are many different ways to do that. What I do not support is hand counting the results of the ballots on election night, because of course that can't be done in one night. That will go on for weeks. And that has been sort of a point that has been raised during the work of the commission. That's certainly an option, but it's not an option that I personally view as being very viable. So I'm looking for a system that has a scanner that voter to verify their vote is as they intended, run it through a scanner, let the scanner count the ballots, and then that ballot drops into a box of some sort, I think, that's locked and is tagged and appropriately accounted for, so that if there's a need to do a recount or an audit, you have a paper ballot that you can basically provide as the check and balance, and what the scanner tallied up is the total votes. How you accomplish that, I do think vendors will offer a lot of different solutions. At the end of the day, the responsibility for the commission is only to make recommendations. It is the authority of the Secretary of State to execute elections. He will do that the way I'm envisioning it. He will do much of that work through the promulgation of rules, through the Administrative Procedures Act, which we have legislative oversight over. So there are checks and balances there between the executive and legislative branches. We have been working towards funding for a new system. I don't think we have it all funded, but we have some funding. And the Secretary, when he is ready to go, reviews it's the right time, I would imagine would start an RFP process, a bid process, to basically get proposals that's follow the recommendations of the Voting System Commission, so that we can begin the process of replacing our outdated machine.
Well, and we have one question about the trade show aspect of it. Is that going to be open to the general public if somebody wanted to go to see it? And how will they know where it is located and what the time frame is in which they can go?
It will be open to the public. There, I believe that there's going to be one full day for the public itself. So the first day, I believe, is the 28th, which is for the VSC, the legislature, and staff and clerks and registrars. And then the next day is for the public. And so we'll put that on our website. And I do want to say, so that everybody knows and the timeframes that'll be open, but it'll be at the Louisiana State Museum, which is across the street from the state capitol, and directly across the street from the state library. So it's right there on the corner across from the library and the state capitol.
And that's June 29th that it'll be open to the public, right?
28th, my apologies. So I think it's the 27th is the first day, the 28th for the public, the whole day for the public, and then the VSC will meet on the 29th to make final decisions. That way, those members of the public that want to observe, ask questions, get information, and then testify before the commission and give public input, they'll be able to do that. So it'll be fresh in everybody's minds. And I do want to add a little bit to what Senator Hewitt was saying. In the last election, and to give confidence for voters and where we're going would enable even additional confidence, is we had 3 very close races in the state, across the state, in 3 different areas of the state, where a handful of votes, one here in East Baton Rouge Parish, a judgeship was settled by 2 votes, and every one of those recounts were spot on. So, I think our partnership with our clerks, our registrars, and the state, the Secretary of State's office has proven a good model, and we want to keep the proven things and then move forward with those other things that give voters even more confidence and provides more transparency. So I really think that, again, we continue to have the gold standard moving forward.
And maybe this is a question to start with Bridget. Senator Hewitt already said that she is not in favor of hand counting the ballots, that there will still be some technology involved. Is that where the clerks are as well, that they would like to see some technology? I mean, it seems pretty obvious that it would be difficult to quickly tally any results if you don't have any technology, but I just want to make sure I'm clear if everybody's on the same page about needing, whether it's a ballot marking device or a scanner or something that involves technology to count these ballots.
The clerks are absolutely against hand counting. There there's no way that we can ask our commissioners who already work 15 hours a day to stay there until, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, or however long it would take. They're exhausted. And so we are definitely against that. And of course, I think they'd have to be recounted by the Board of Election Supervisors. I think it would be a long, long time before we knew who won. It would not be election night. So we are definitely against that. And the clerks are very much in support of a voter verified paper record. But we did have some voting companies come in at our clerks conference in last month. And there are other options available that do not include necessarily a paper ballot, but a voter verified paper record. And also, we're probably looking a couple years down the line before we even get something. So there could be other things that are developed by voting system companies that we may want to look at. So, we're just kind of keeping our options open and not stepping in saying exactly what we want right now, but we definitely do not want hand count.
Understood.
Yeah, to reiterate that, if I may, you don't have to go very far. Just this week in Pennsylvania and Oregon's primaries, they're still counting ballots. There were one counting in Pennsylvania, and I believe it's one counting in Oregon. But for sure, Pennsylvania, they had, I think it was around 20,000 ballots that did not scan. There was a printing error, and thus the scanners didn't recognize it. So they are having to re-hand mark those ballots and under scrutiny, transparent wise, and then rescan those. So they've got their governor's race is in the balance in terms of the party preference, depending upon the outcome of these last ballots. So that we need to make sure that whatever system we have, we want to keep the commitment to the voters of Louisiana that we have unofficial results on election night, just as we have had in the past. And that's one of my commitments that I want to keep. And I think my panelists would agree with that.
And can somebody talk about what are the options in terms of, I know for myself, I know that there are these various ballot marking devices that are an option, or there are ways to handwrite a ballot and then scan it through. So can someone talk about what kinds of options there are available in terms of what the state can get? Because I know that Senator Hewitt's legislation says that we cannot use those direct recording devices that we have now, those big blocky election day machines. Those are definitely going away. We're not going to get new ones of those. So can someone talk about what technology may be used here?
Well, I think it's gonna, I would rather people come out and see what's going to be offered when next month when we're showing the voting machines, because I think there are a lot of different options and a lot of different companies that we will be looking at. And so I would hate to, go into exactly what options are, because I may not know all of the options at this time.
Well, how about, and that's wise counsel, I'll just maybe try to say from a high level perspective, there's kind of families of equipment maybe. So, they do have ballot marking devices. Those basically allow you to choose, like on a touch screen, who you're voting for, would spit out some kind of a paper record that the voter could look at and just determine whether that is their intention or not. In some cases, you would go to a separate machine that could be a scanner that you would scan your ballot in. It would read the results and tally the results. In some cases, it's built in, it's all in one. I mean, there's many different ways to solve that, or whether the voter actually takes possession of it or you see it. There are many different ways. You want to make sure that at the end of the day, any paper record is left with the election officials and not with the voter. There are other kind of families of systems, I think, where you go mark it by hand. You bubble in a ballot like an ACT test or something. There's different ways to do that. Again, you would then scan it into a machine so that the ballot gets tallied. So the goal in all of those systems is, in my view, is to have checks and balances between the machine count and a paper count, that you could go back and recount by hand if there was ever any question and you needed to make sure the numbers matched on a at a particular precinct or whatever the issue seems to be. The machines that we currently have, the DREs, the direct recording equipment, those are the big clunkers that we've all grown up with. Some of them do have what's called a verified paper ballot. Let's say VPAT. I don't know it for anymore, Kyle, but I think it's generally kind of a paper, a scroll that is recording it, but it's difficult to audit that because it's just like a cash register receipt roll. It just keeps a tally of all the votes. That is a solution that some people might use. I do believe I specifically prohibit that in my legislation from being used. And it was largely because it's just very difficult to audit because it's just scrolls of rolled up paper and they're all connected. They're not separate ballots. And the feedback that I had from other states is that was just a little bit clumsy and difficult to use. And so I do think as Bridget said, that there's multiple solutions from different companies to accomplish the same broad objectives.
And we've gotten a question in the chat that might be for either Bridget or Kyle, asking about what will happen to the paper ballots or the paper receipts that are collected as part of this process. Who stores it, who's in charge of them, and who essentially secures them?
So it depends on, the time frame depends upon whether it's a federal election or a state election. But in essence, it stays with the local clerk as the chief elections officer of each parish. And so they are the record keeper of that. Certainly people come to us with public records requests, and then we work cooperatively with the clerks to produce whatever information that they're looking for, as well as the registrars. So I don't envision that piece of things changing, but I do agree with Senator Hewitt that when we were discussing the legislation, the VVPAT or voter verifiable paper audit trail was something that really didn't give us what we were hoping to have, and that is the voter being able to physically verify their vote before casting it. So whether that's a BMD, for the folks that, on the podcast, a ballot marking device that produces either a summary or it produces a full face paper ballot. Then the voter verifies that in hand, eyeballing their choices, and then stepping to another piece of equipment that acts as the tabulator. And thus the tabulator is the one that collects the ballots and keeps them locked so that those nothing can be taken away. And as I've said on many occasions, I don't want the voter walking out. I think we've come a long way in our elections in Louisiana, especially from the fraud portions of it in terms of voters vote buying. If you let someone walk out of the polling location with their vote or the summary of their vote, then you're creating a potential for people selling their vote, if you will. And obviously, a lot of human resources goes into elections, but we have political campaigns, and we have prosecuted individuals for election offenses of just simply manipulating elderly voters and coercing them to vote in a certain way. We got a conviction 2 years ago of an individual doing that. So we need to be very careful in how we do this, but provide for transparency, provide for voter verification, provide for the ability to audit. The same things my fellow panelists are talking about, but protect the voter as well from being either coerced or intimidated or bribed. Because we know that, not everybody's willing to act according to law, unfortunately, but that's core to the process: transparency, auditability, accuracy, voter verifiability, and protecting the voter. And then, of course, we have to make certain that we address the needs of the disability community. And so whatever system we choose, we have to be cognizant of the needs and the concerns of the disability community to vote as independently as possible with any voting system, which is what they're requesting. And so we have to take that all into consideration. And I know that the commission members are very sensitive to those issues.
And we have a question about voters with disabilities. Are they going to be using the same technology that they have now? Will they be, obviously they'll have some sort of updated technology to match whatever is going on with the new system. How does that play into it in terms of, are you expecting that you'll have to get specialized technology for voters with disabilities, or will they be able to use whatever equipment we switch to next as a state?
The short answer is yes, we'll probably have to have some additional equipment necessary for the disability community, just as we have today, but more advanced technology to allow them to be as independent in this in the voting process as possible. Their request is for us to look at for a system for them that allows them not to have someone to assist them in voting. And so we need to look very carefully at all the options out there to try to get as close to that request as possible.
And we've also got a question about if the changes will affect absentee by mail ballots at all. Somebody's asking, how are they certified now? And will there be any changes to that process? I don't know who wants to take that one.
Go ahead, Senator.
I'll say absentee by mail balloting is completely from the focus of the Voting System Commission. We're looking at voting systems. The laws on absentee by mail balloting are, in statute. We do, consider new legislation every year that deals with absentee by mail balloting. We actually passed a bill last year that I was supportive of that required a voter ID, like a driver's license number, to be on your mail ballot request form, so that because we show a voter ID for in-person voting, this was a way to ensure and kind of connect the voter to their mail ballot. The legislature did pass that bill last year. The governor vetoed it. And we'll continue to consider legislation as legislators bring that forward on mail balloting. That is separate side of this Voting System Commission work and the work that we're talking about today.
Okay. Yes.
If I may, I think the senator's right. Our process for absentee balloting is in law. The one thing, the component that we have to remember is part of the election management system that comes with a new voting system does have some implication on the production of the absentee ballots, the creation of the absentee ballots for all of the jurisdictions, for every person living in every precinct in the state. And so that will have to be a component of it. So we have to be cognizant of that. And also we need to make sure that there's a track record of the company in their ability to produce. Additionally, the other issue is most election management systems require the printer to be certified with their system. And so it's a external but internal operation for the vendor that does the actual production of the absentee ballots. And I'm pleased that, we've traditionally used an in-state printer. That way we're very closely connected and we're able to control quality so that the things that happen in Pennsylvania and Oregon aren't the same types of things that happen in Louisiana.
Well, and Bridget, let me ask you this specific set of questions, which is, what are the biggest concerns for the clerks in terms of the selection of a new voting system? Is it about storage? Is it about training? I mean, obviously, the state is going to have 3 million voters who are used to voting on a certain set of systems and now are going to have completely different systems to deal with. So what is the biggest concern from the clerk's perspective of just the logistics of all of this?
So like I said before, our biggest concern is always with our voters and a system that they can easily use, and also our commissioners, because the clerks are required to train the commissioners. So, no matter what system we go to, there's going to be a lot of training involved with that. If we have paper ballots, that brings a whole nother set of issues that we have to deal with. Like Kyle was saying, the storage of those ballots are going to fall upon the clerk. That could be up to 22 months for a federal election. A lot of clerks don't have the room to store all of that. I know that we had one election official from Florida saying that, they have the paper ballot system. They have over a 10,000 square foot building in this one county that they use to store all of that and all of their equipment. It also is a problem if you have to have it climate controlled because of the humidity in Louisiana. I mean, it would be difficult for the humidity not to affect paper. On the precinct level, we have over 600 precincts that are not climate controlled. That's a lot of precincts that if you have sorry, my light went out, that if you have all of this paper, that you're storing during an election day, and it's a very humid day, is that going to go through the scanner? Are we going to have a lot of jams with the scanner? That's all things. The more equipment that you have, the more the commissioners are going to have to deal with. And, most of our voting is on election day, 70%. Whereas in the Florida county, the majority, it was just the opposite. 70% of their voting was early voting. And ours is 70% on election day. So the commissioners are going to be dealing with this. And the more equipment that we have, if we have one place that they have, either a ballot marking device or whatever that might be, and then they have to walk over to a scanner, I'm going to have more commissioners at every area to make sure that person's not walking out with that ballot. They're going straight to the scanner. When they put that scanner in, is it going to reject their ballot? Maybe it's an overvote. For whatever reason, the scanner doesn't like it. The commissioner's going to have to figure that out. We're concerned that that's going to back lines up with voting.
It sounds like there's going to be some training required for everybody in this, including not just the elections workers, but also the voters themselves.
Absolutely. And I mean, no matter what system we have, because I've gone to a different system than what we have now many years ago. And I mean, I went out into the community to all of the stores, to churches and everything to train the voters. And I plan to do that. And I'm sure a lot of the clerks will do that too. We're going to get the people educated. It's just, we have a lot more issues than training that we have to deal with, right, that we're going to have to look at.
Right. We do have a question about how much funding has been committed to date for this new voting system. I know that the last time I've asked this question, Kyle, you said you didn't have an estimate yet for how much this might cost because we don't exactly know what system we're going to go to, but is there any federal funding, or has the legislature set aside any funding yet for the system?
So as of now, we have 12.8 million give or take set aside from federal funding with an additional 1.3 million match. So that gives us upwards of almost 14 million. I'm pleased to say that in the supplemental appropriations bill, Chairman Zarang put in an additional 10 million. So I'm very pleased with that. So we're looking at around $28 million, give or take, for at least a decent down payment. And depending upon the system and depending upon the nuances and what we need to do for the disability community and that sort of thing, then we'll know once everything comes in after the RFP. But this is a great start. I'm really pleased that the legislature has taken some of this one-time money. I think a sizable amount, 10 million is pretty sizable. I I'd been dreaming and begging for years, and now it's coming to fruition. I almost want to pinch myself and say, is this real? But it is, and I'm very pleased with it, as long as, you know, the governor holds with it once everything's passed. Not knowing what the nuances are of the new system, we can't really totally estimate it. But I do think it'll be cheaper than any previous estimates that we were accused of. Maintenance is another part of the cost mechanism. So there's the initial cost, and then there's the maintenance cost, and a lot of people bundled all that together to come up with the $100 million cost frame. But I do not think it's going to be $100 million. I just can't imagine it being that way. If so, I think we're going to have to back up and reassess where we're going. But I will say this, and one of the things that Senator Hewitt and Clerk Hanna and I are going to have to grapple with on the Voting System Commission with our other commissioners is the 2.0 new standards that were approved, called the VVSG the VVSG Voluntary Voter System Guidelines. This new standards are at the 2.0 level. And to date, there's not a single company that has even proposed anything to meet those standards. As well, and even more concerning, and I raised this to some members of Congress as I was visiting this week with them, is that there's no testing facility yet certified to even test any equipment to the 2.0 standards. And Senator Hewitt and I don't want to speak for her, but she and I have had conversations, and we both have said this publicly. It makes no sense for us to initiate a new system that's with old standards. If we're going to invest a lot of money into this, then we need to do it with the new standards. And that, to me, that just makes sense. Otherwise, we'd be wasting taxpayer dollars, and I don't think the taxpayers want us to do that.
And Senator Hewitt, let me ask you this. Do you envision that the legislature will have any problems putting up the money to fund the new system? And do you assume that the new system cost will include addressing some of Bridget's concerns for the clerks about the warehouse space and those kind of things? Do you see the state helping the clerks with that?
Well, I'm not sure exactly how to answer that about the storage. I don't know if those are generally parish funded operations or state funded operations, but I do think the legislature will do our part to make sure that we fund this new voting system. We, signed off on the legislation. We passed legislation. We acknowledge that we have 30-year-old machines that are falling apart and difficult to get replacement parts for. And so, what we will be looking for, I think, will be a proposal from the Secretary of State to say, all right, here's the RFP, here's my plan on how to implement it, this is what it's going to cost, and put a proposal on the table that I can then help advocate with him and for him for funding. And so, we have already, as you said, 28 million is, and been consistent over the last few years. We've been putting some money in the pot so that we can move forward. It is very important that we have kind of a plan for how we're going to implement the new federal standards, which are fabulous. All the issues that people have been talking about making sure there's security in the system, that the components of the system don't talk to each other, everything's standalone, protected from interference from outside forces. It's very secure, it's not connected to the internet. All of those things are in the federal standard, and the state we will be and so we're all working together, and this new system is going to be well thought out. It's going to take advantage of the best practices that we have learned from all the other states and the very best technology available to us at the time that we make these decisions. And so I'm quite confident that we will fund this, and we will be supportive of the Secretary's plan as he gets it further developed.
So speaking of that, and sort of wrap up, I know there's a couple of questions we didn't get to, but I want to ask, so one thing would be the timeline. Best case scenario, what are we looking at in terms of having this roll out? What would that look like? and then what would be, sort of a more realistic scenario in terms of actually when we might have new voting machines? Secretary, you want to answer that?
Well, of course, if we're going to stand strong with the new standards, which I agree with the senator, most of which were built into our previous RFP and have been traditionally part of our process, but not necessarily all in statute. When we go through the rulemaking process, we'll be working closely with the oversight committees to make sure the standards are what we all want and expect. Once that is completed, so the VSC finishes its job in June, makes recommendation, then I begin the job of promulgating rules on standards and specifications to some degree. We'll have a transparent, open dialogue with the public and the oversight committees. And then only after then do we start an RFP process. What's going to be important about that at that point is, has any company made themselves available with any certification to the 2.0 standards? My concern would be if there's only one entity out there, one vendor that meets 2.0 standards, do I really want to move forward with an RFP at that point, or do I want to wait for competition? And the conservative in me says we need competition. Companies only improve if there's somebody's competing against the other one. Otherwise, you may not get what you want. And then I think both Bridget and Sharon Hewitt would agree with me, is that we need to have a stringent certification process within our state. Right now, the law does require me to not only for them to have EAC certification, which I support wholeheartedly, but then we need to have a stringent certification and a transparent certification process in Louisiana. And I want to add some processes to that to make sure that's what we're doing, and show the voters that we're being even more stringent than what the EAC is doing.
Great, but and I'm glad you're taking it cautiously, and those sound like concerns that it should be serious. But let me ask it another way: a soonest by date. If you don't have these problems with getting enough people that can meet certification and everything, you have plenty of people to choose from, we can expect new voting machines no sooner than
probably 2 years.
2 years. Okay. All right. And for all the reasons you mentioned, and things probably we can't even conceive right now, it might be even longer than that, but probably we're looking at this point for at least a 2-year process.
That is correct.
Okay, great. I just think everyone kind of would want to know that, so we kind of know what we're talking about. This isn't something that happened for the congressional elections or even next year's governor's race.
No.
Okay. All right. Great. All right. I know we still have a ton of questions we couldn't get to. We actually went a little over on time. This always happens. We always have a great audience, participants asking things. Really thank every one of the panelists. I think y'all have been great. Really a wonderful set of experts to discuss this. I think we've had model behavior in terms of how we discuss these very technical issues, but very important issues. Again, I want to thank ExxonMobil for sponsoring us. And that's how we're able to do these hopefully informative webinars. Next webinar that we're going to have is going to be at the session wrap up, which I know everyone's going to be interested in. So you actually find out what really happened. We actually will have some legislators tune in to see, like, what did we do? So I don't know if that's true. If you're interested in anything that we're doing, please go to our website at parlouisiana.org or follow us on social media. And remember, we will have this posted on our YouTube channel. You can follow up and see not only this one, but all our previous ones, which have a lot of interest in those. Thank y'all all again. Thank you to our panelists. Y'all were wonderful. Thank you to our participants. Y'all had great questions. Again, I apologize if we couldn't get to them. That always happens. But hopefully we're able to get a lot more information and illuminate this subject. It's a very important subject. Thanks everyone, and everyone have a great weekend.
Thank you.
You too.
Yeah.